Hello everyone, my name is Ricardo Perez, and today my presentation is about issues surrounding gay Hispanic men. So the main focus will be on the term machismo, and that's something we learned in the module where we spoke about Hispanic men's issues. So if you don't remember, machismo is influential in the Hispanic community. It's a masculine trait that is taught to young boys, young men, men in general, that pretty much emphasize hyper masculinity, and was mostly seen in a negative light. It's a result of feeling vulnerable, impotent, and submissive, and was created as a way to cope with the loss of power. Machismo has important implications in the lives of gay Hispanic men and their dynamic relationships with others. So what is machismo? So it has various meanings, and it also depends on the type of culture. There's different Hispanic communities, different Latin communities, so depending on who you talk to, it may be a traditional sense or a progressive sense. So here's a traditional sense. So it's a domination of women, competition between men, aggressive display, predatory sexuality, and double standards. It was developed when Mexican men found themselves unable to protect their women from the conquests, ensuing plunder, pillage, and rape. Native men developed an overly masculine and aggressive response in order to compensate for deeply felt feelings of powerlessness and weakness. Machismo then is nothing more than a futile attempt to mask profound sense of impotence, powerlessness, ineptitude, and expression of weakness, and a sense of inferiority. So it pretty much became the standard for how males should act in the Hispanic communities. Like I said before, it was associated with negative traits. Exaggerated masculinity, violence, male dominance, self-centeredness. And it's often attributed to domestic violence, promiscuity, disrespectfulness, selfishness, and abusive behavior, according to a study that was done in a prison, where they had questionnaires about what machismo meant for them, and it started out negative, and it ended up positive, and I'll get to that in a second. So what does this mean, and what does this imply in the gay Hispanic men community? So it creates internal homophobia and makes them question their masculinity constantly. Internalized homophobia leads to Hispanic gay men to be more risky when it comes to sexual encounters, unsafe sex, and are more likely to be infected with STDs and HIV, which Hispanic men are already prone to. So this even furthers it more. These behaviors and traits among gay men are also dependent on the way that they think about machismo. Like I said, traditional version, the one I just defined, versus the progressive one, which I'm going to get to. They found that men who have sex with other men but do not identify as gay report higher machismo and higher risk for unsafe sex and promiscuity than other men who are openly gay. So that means that those who do not identify as gay but have sex with men are more promiscuous and have internalized homophobia than an openly gay man. So there's even differences within that. So, gender roles defined by the concept of traditional machismo are likely to be incompatible to practices of lesbian and gay behaviors, and people with higher machismo may tend to perceive such practices as a violation of traditional gender roles, which makes sense because machismo pretty much emphasizes hypermasculinity, violence, just excessive masculine traits that make it negative. So in order to reduce the prejudice towards lesbian and gay men among Latinos, levels of machismo across the genders should be taken into consideration. So, their sense of what it means, traditional versus progressive. And one other thing to know is that the rigid gender roles among Latino families may lead to higher rates of internalized homophobia and feelings that their same-sex attractions are reprehensible. For example, the sexual orientation of gay Latino men through machismo is associated with femininity and relegated to a lower status, which means that they feel lower than because of these very rigid social construct of machismo. So while machismo can be defined in the traditional sense, newer definitions have come up as we, progress through society and become more educated. So it's important to note that while machismo was seen in a negative light, there are positive traits and behaviors that should help change the negative perception of machismo into a progressive one, as we have seen changes in the way that masculinity has changed its definition throughout history. So, assertiveness can be a positive trait, responsibility, code of ethics, sincerity, brave, courageous, protective. These are positive traits of masculinity and also machismo. And it's also, you can think of it as a continuum of things. So here's positive, here's negative, and literally you can go either one within that spectrum. So machismo is not one thing, but a continuum, and can be a positive way to express masculinity when asking the right questions and changing the paradigm from negative to positive. For example, there was a study done, as I said before, about Latino and Hispanic men in prison, and were asked about their perspective on machismo, and instead of being negative, they started to focus on more positive traits of it. For example, so redefining machismo through questions, and they asked, instead of focusing on material possessions, focus on family. Instead of focusing on what friends think, focus on what's best for your children or your family. So an example is, how important are material possessions to you, to how you view yourself as a man? How about family? What is a healthy focus on material possessions, and what is unhealthy? Which gives you more satisfaction? That can help shift their focus from focus on material possession to focus on family. For number 2, concerning what friends think, to concerning what is best for children, they asked, what is more important to you? What your friends think of you, or what your children think of you? Why? Has this changed over time? If so, how? So it starts to put things into perspective. Putting a positive spin on this once negative idea. Let's see what else. So the more progressive view of machismo could be like, including the positive aspects of it. For example, being assertive, being responsible, being sincere, brave, courageous, protective. This can also be used in today's standards. And also, like I said before, depending on what you use, Hispanic men will either thrive or not thrive. You know, it can affect every aspect of their life. So it's pretty important to change this this idea in the Hispanic community, change it, transcend from where it began, and just for it to become more positive for both, not just, you know, gay Hispanic men, but women too. So that is my presentation. I hope you liked it. And yeah, thanks for watching.